Welcome back to Ben's Book Summaries, where we take a stack of your sources and pull out all the important stuff.
The good stuff.
Exactly. And today we're diving deep into a book that has Bill Gates pretty excited.
Oh, yeah. Which one?
It's called The Coming Wave by Mustafa Suleyman.
I haven't heard of that one.
Well, Bill Gates calls it his favorite book on AI, so I figured it was worth checking out.
Oh, wow, okay. From Bill Gates, huh? That's saying something. So what's it all about?
Well, it's about AI, obviously, and synthetic biology.
Okay, two pretty hot topics right now.
Yeah, for sure. But what's really interesting is that Suleyman focuses on the risks of these technologies.
Risks, huh? Everyone's talking about the amazing potential, all the cool stuff AI can do.
Right, and the book definitely acknowledges that. But Suleyman argues that these technologies pose some unique dangers that we haven't really dealt with before.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What kind of dangers are we talking about?
Well, he compares it to the threat of nuclear weapons, but says it's actually even more complicated.
More complicated than nukes. How so?
Well, think about it. Nuclear weapons require massive infrastructure, tons of resources, really hard to get your hands on that stuff.
Yeah, that's true. Not something you can just whip up in your garage.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But AI and synthetic biology, they're becoming more accessible and affordable all the time.
Ah, I see where you're going with this. So it's harder to control, harder to monitor, harder to contain.
Exactly. The old playbook just doesn't apply here.
Yeah, that's a scary thought. So what does Suleiman suggest we do about it? Just say no to AI and biotech.
Well, he actually presents a pretty tough dilemma. He says that embracing these technologies could lead to unintended consequences, maybe even catastrophe, who knows?
Yeah, there's a lot of unknowns. But rejecting them completely, isn't that just shutting down progress?
That's the other side of the coin, he says. Rejecting them could lead to some kind of techno-authoritarian dystopia where innovation is stifled and freedom is restricted.
So damned if you do, damned if you don't. Sounds like a real pickle. What makes this guy, Suleiman, such an expert anyway?
Well, he's not just some random theorist. This guy co-founded DeepMind.
DeepMind. Wait, the company behind AlphaGo? The AI that beat the world champion Go player?
That's the one.
Yeah.
So he's been at the forefront of AI development, seen what these systems can do firsthand.
Okay, so he's not just talking the talk, he's walked the walk.
Exactly. And that's why I think his warnings are so important. He's not coming at this from some ivory tower. He's been in the trenches.
All right, so we've got these unique risks, a dilemma with no easy answers, and an author who knows what he's talking about. What else does the book dive into?
Well, one thing I found really interesting is that it goes beyond the typical superintelligence fears.
You mean like the robots taking over the world scenario?
Yeah, that whole Skynet thing. Suleiman says, yeah, superintelligence is something to think about, but it's not the most immediate threat.
Okay, so what is the most immediate threat?
He argues that we should be more concerned with AI systems that are incredibly capable but not necessarily conscious.
So not some sentient AI that's plotting to overthrow humanity, but something else.
Right. Think about AI that can manipulate language incredibly well, generate those deep fakes that are so realistic they could erode trust in everything.
Or even AI that could control critical infrastructure, like power grids or transportation systems.
Exactly. The potential for disruption and harm is huge,
Yeah.
even if the AI isn't thinking in the way we do.
I see. So it's more about the unintended consequences, the potential for misuse, even with good intentions.
Precisely. And to really drive home his point, he uses some real-world examples that are pretty mind-blowing.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, there's this story about Erazvika. It was a group of drone hobbyists in Ukraine.
Drone hobbyists? What do they have to do with AI?
Well, they used their tech skills, their drones, and some clever AI applications to actually disrupt a major Russian military advance.
Wow, seriously? That's incredible.
Yeah, it just shows you how accessible and powerful these technologies are becoming. It's not just nation-states anymore.
Okay, that's a little unnerving. Any other examples that stuck with you?
Yeah, there's this chilling account of how Israeli agents use an AI-powered sniper rifle to assassinate a top Iranian official.
An AI sniper rifle.
Yep. Raises all sorts of ethical questions about targeted killings, the future of warfare, the potential for AI to escalate conflicts.
Yeah, that's some serious stuff. It's like something out of a sci-fi thriller, but it's happening now.
It's a stark reminder that AI is not some abstract concept. It's already having a real impact on the world, and not always for the better.
Okay, so we've got accessible AI, powerful AI, potentially dangerous AI. What else?
Well, there's this other story that really captures the public's fascination and anxiety about AI. It's about Blake Lemoine.
Who's that?
He's a Google engineer who was convinced that an AI chatbot had actually become sentient.
Wait, seriously, he thought the chatbot was conscious.
Yeah, it became a huge story, sparked a ton of debate about the nature of consciousness, whether AI could truly feel or experience the world like we do.
I vaguely remember hearing something about that, so was it sentient?
Well, most experts say no. But the fact that this chatbot could mimic human conversation so convincingly that it could fool a seasoned engineer, that's pretty unsettling, don't you think?
It definitely blurs the lines a bit, makes you wonder what is consciousness anyway, and how will we even know if AI achieves it?
Big questions. And it all ties back into Suleiman's main argument. Even if AI isn't truly conscious, it can still be incredibly persuasive and manipulative.
Right, and that has huge implications for how we interact with these systems, how we design them, how we guard against potential harm.
Absolutely. So we've got this coming wave of powerful technologies accessible to almost anyone and a dilemma with no easy answers. What do we do?
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in all the doom and gloom. Is there any hope, any solutions on the horizon?
Well, before we get into that, I want to shift gears for a second and look at some other books and ideas that Bill Gates has been talking about.
Oh, yeah. More AI stuff.
Some AI, some other stuff too.
Yeah.
I figure if we want to understand this whole AI landscape, it's good to get a broader view.
Makes sense. Bill Gates is a pretty smart guy. I'm always curious to see what he's reading.
Exactly. So one book that caught my eye was Brave New Words by Sal Khan. Have you heard of him?
Khan Academy. Yeah, isn't he the guy who wants to make education free for everyone?
That's him. And in this book, he takes a much more optimistic view of AI, particularly its potential to revolutionize education.
Really? How so?
Well, he talks about AI tutors that could provide personalized instruction for every student.
So instead of one-size-fits-all lessons, each student gets a customized learning experience.
Exactly. Imagine if teachers could be freed from having to teach to the average and could instead focus on building relationships, mentoring students, fostering creativity.
That would be amazing. But, technology can be a double-edged sword. Will all students benefit equally, or will we just see a widening of the digital divide?
That's a really important point. Technology can be a powerful tool for good, but we have to make sure everyone has access to it, not just the privileged few.
Absolutely. Access and equity are crucial.
Totally. And speaking of the potential downsides of technology, another book Gates recommends is The Anxious Generation by Jean Twenge. It's all about the impact of smartphones and social media on young people.
Oh, yeah, that's a hot topic. A lot of parents are worried about screen time, social media addiction, all that stuff.
Right. And Twenge raises some serious concerns about the impact of these technologies on mental health, social skills, attention spans. And this is all before AI really starts to kick in.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what the future holds for kids growing up in a world where AI is everywhere. Will they be able to navigate this new landscape? Will they be able to thrive?
It's definitely something we need to think about, especially as we're grappling with all these other AI challenges. So we've got these contrasting perspectives, the potential for AI to revolutionize education, and the concerns about its impact on young people.
A lot to unpack.
Yeah, it's a complex picture. But I think it highlights the need for thoughtful discussions, nuanced approaches. We can't just blindly embrace AI or reject it outright.
We need to figure out how to integrate these technologies into our lives in a way that maximizes the benefits and minimizes the risks.
Absolutely. And speaking of risks and solutions, let's circle back to the coming wave for a minute.
Okay, yeah, we kind of left things hanging there with that whole dilemma thing. So what does Suleyman propose as a way forward?
Well, he uses this term containment. But it's not about stopping progress. It's more about steering it in a safer direction.
Containment, huh? So how do we contain something as powerful and pervasive as AI? It sounds like a pretty big challenge. So how does he suggest we do that?
Well, he talks about a multi-pronged approach, starting with something he calls technical safety.
Technical safety.
Yeah, basically building safeguards directly into the AI systems themselves.
Okay, so kind of like embedding safety features from the ground up.
Exactly. So think like bias detection mechanisms, to make sure the AI isn't perpetuating societal prejudices.
Right, so the AI is making fair and impartial decisions.
Exactly. Or what about kill switches? Way to shut down rogue systems if they start behaving unpredictably.
Oh, yeah, like an emergency brake for AI.
Right. And of course, mechanisms for transparency so we can understand how these systems are making decisions in the first place.
Yeah, transparency is huge. It's hard to trust something if you don't know how it works.
Totally. So all of that falls under technical safety. But he also acknowledges that that's not enough.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Technology is always evolving. Someone's always going to try to find ways to circumvent those safeguards.
Exactly. So that's why he also emphasizes the need for robust regulation, new laws, international agreements.
Like what we have for nuclear weapons or pharmaceuticals.
Right. It's about establishing clear guidelines, consequences for misuse, ensuring responsible innovation.
Sounds good in theory, but getting global consensus on something as complex as AI, that's got to be a nightmare, right?
Oh, yeah, it's a huge challenge for sure. Countries have different priorities, different values, different levels of tech development.
So how do you even begin to bridge those divides?
Well, Suleiman points to the nuclear non-proliferation treaties as a kind of model.
Interesting. They weren't perfect, obviously, but they did help to contain a pretty major threat.
Exactly. And they show that international cooperation is possible, even when it's really difficult.
So we need a similar level of global engagement to address the challenges of AI. Easier said than done, though, right?
For sure. But I think it starts with recognizing that the risks of AI are global. No single nation can deal with this alone. We're all in this together, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, kind of like climate change.
Exactly. It's a shared responsibility.
Okay, so we've got technical safety, we've got regulation. What else is in this containment toolkit?
Well, Suleiman also talks about strategically controlling key resources and infrastructure. He calls them choke points in the tech supply chain.
Choke points. Like what?
Think about things like the manufacturing of advanced computer chips, the mining of those rare earth elements that are essential for a lot of high-tech stuff.
Ah, okay, so if you control those choke points, you can kind of influence the pace and direction of AI development.
Exactly. It's like a global circuit breaker for the coming wave of AI.
Interesting analogy. But who gets to control that circuit breaker? That's a lot of power.
Right. And that's where all those other pieces come in, the international cooperation, the regulation, the ethical
With
considerations.
a lot to juggle.
Oh, yeah. No easy answers here. But I think Suleiman's point is that we can't just sit back and let this wave crash over us. We need to be proactive, thoughtful, strategic.
Makes sense. And I think that's where the insights from Bill Gates' other reading recommendations come in, right? Remember that book, The Better Angels of Our Nature?
Yeah, the one by Steven Pinker that argues that violence has actually declined significantly throughout human history.
Right. It's a good reminder that progress is possible even in the face of really daunting challenges.
Exactly. And even though it's not directly about AI, I think it offers a valuable perspective. Pickett talks about how our capacity for reason, empathy, cooperation has played a big role in reducing violence over time.
And those same qualities are going to be essential as we navigate this whole AI thing.
Totally. We need to foster a sense of shared humanity, recognize that the choices we make about AI are going to have a huge impact on the future of our species.
Yeah, it's not just about the tech, it's about who we are, what we value.
Exactly. And there's another book Gates recommended, Factfulness, by Hans Rosling. It's all about using data to challenge our assumptions about global progress.
I've heard of that one. Isn't his main point that the world is both bad and better at the same time?
Exactly. He encourages a more nuanced view, recognizing that progress is often incremental, sometimes even messy.
So applying that to AI, we shouldn't expect a quick fix, some magic bullet solution. It's going to be a long process of adaptation, learning, course correction.
Yeah, we need to be flexible, pragmatic, willing to adjust our strategies as we go.
Makes sense. This isn't a one and done situation, it's an ongoing conversation.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things Bill Gates is trying to do with his reading recommendations. He's encouraging us to engage with different viewpoints, to weigh the evidence, to form our own conclusions.
Yeah, he's not telling us what to think, he's giving us tools to think for ourselves.
Exactly. And that's so important, especially in a world where AI is becoming increasingly powerful.
We need to be informed, engaged, critical thinkers.
Absolutely. It's kind of like he's curating a reading list for the AI age, you know, giving us the tools to navigate this uncharted territory.
I like that, a reading list for the AI age. What a concept.
Right. And one of the most thought-provoking contrasts I found was between that optimistic view of AI in education from Sal Khan.
Yeah, the AI tutors, personalized learning, all that.
Right. And then on the other hand, you've got Gene Quench's concerns about the impact of technology on young people.
The anxiety, the screen time, the social media overload.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like a classic example of the double-edged sword of technology, right? There's always this tension between the potential benefits and the potential downsides.
And with AI, the stakes just seem so much higher.
Oh, yeah, for sure. On the one hand, we've got the possibility of transforming education, empowering teachers, making learning more accessible and engaging. But on the other hand, we have to be really mindful of those potential downsides.
The addiction, the distraction, the social isolation, all of that. Plus, who knows what other unintended consequences might pop up.
It's tricky, right? Because we don't want to stifle innovation, but we also don't want to sleepwalk into a dystopian future where technology controls us instead of the other way around.
Yeah, finding that balance is going to be key.
Totally. And I think that's the real takeaway from the coming wave and all of these books that Bill Gates has been recommending. It's a call to action, an invitation to engage in a thoughtful and informed debate about the role of technology in our lives.
It's not about blindly embracing AI or rejecting it outright. It's about having those tough conversations, weighing the pros and cons, and figuring out how to shape this technology in a way that benefits humanity.
Absolutely. And
hmm
ultimately, the future is not preordained, right? It's something we create through our choices, our actions, our collective vision.
We have the power to shape the coming wave, to steer it in a direction that aligns with our values and aspirations.
Well said. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Bill Gates's reading on AI, particularly his thoughts on the coming wave. It's been a fascinating journey exploring both the incredible potential and the very real risks of this emerging technology.
A lot to think about for sure.
Definitely. And before we wrap things up here on Ben's book summaries, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought to ponder. If Bill Gates were to write his own summary of the coming wave, what unique insights do you think he would bring to the table?
That's a great question. Knowing Bill Gates, I think he would probably focus on the practical side of things, Like, what concrete steps can we take to contain these risks and harness the power of AI for good?
Yeah, he's all about solutions, isn't he?
Totally. He might also draw some interesting connections to other historical technological revolutions, highlighting lessons learned from the past and emphasizing the importance of being adaptable and resilient.
Oh yeah, for sure. He's got that big picture perspective.
And maybe he'd even share some anecdotes from his own experience in the tech industry. Give us a glimpse behind the curtain of how these transformative technologies are actually built and scaled.
That would be amazing. It's fun to imagine what that book would look like.
Yeah, maybe someday we'll get to do a deep dive into Bill Gates' own book on AI.
That would be epic. But until then, this is just the beginning of your journey into the fascinating world of AI. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those brains buzzing.
And remember, knowledge is power, especially in a world where AI is becoming increasingly powerful.
Well said. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you.
The pleasure was all mine. Always a great time diving deep with you.
And to all our listeners out there, thanks for tuning in to Ben's Book Summaries. We'll catch you next time for another insightful deep dive.
See you next time.